Hey guys, welcome to episode 21 of Between the Lanes. I'm Ralph.
I'm Ron.
Thank you guys for tuning in last week. Last week was one of my favorite shows. Man, I had no idea about all the history of the American model car raceways. And, you know, when I went to a track, I knew that it was, you know, like an American model raceway, but I didn't know, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So to learn about all that and see all the documentation that you had was really cool, and I'm really looking forward to part 2 this week. So we're going to continue some of the American model raceway history where we left off, and
Right.
then we're going to move our way into a couple other manufacturers and track builders before we close out this week's segment. So I guess if you got something you want to get us kicked off with, anything you got before we get into the history?
Happy New Year, everybody. But other than that, normally we do race results and race announcements, and none of that this week. We'll catch up with last week's race results next week and get back on track. This show's going to be full with everything we got, so
Yep.
we have limited time.
Okay.
So last week's show was an hour and a half or so, and this will probably be pretty close, but I don't know. I'm ready to rip. Are you ready to rip?
Let's do it. Let's go.
Okay, so, last week we talked about American Raceways, pretty much the whole episode, and, of course, they were kind of like the granddaddy of track builders of the 60s, and there were several other track builders at the time, and some came and went, and and then there's the AMF story, which is part of the American Raceway story, and so we're going to get going here. So, last week, Ralph, we showed you the little templates to lay out a raceway, and this is a different set from what I have. I found a picture of this online, and it's got the red, the purple, the blue, the orange, the yellow, the black, and then the 60-foot queen, which is the green template. So don't know if they ever had a template for the Emperor or not, but so far we've seen them all except the Emperor, and I don't know, they had different sets. So,
Well, are you gonna show a picture of everything?
oh, I didn't. Oh,
I'm just kidding with you. I'm just kidding with you.
I'm like, wait a minute. So last time we talked about American Raceways had their offices and showroom in the Standard Building and in Beverly Hills, California. And this is a picture. I don't know how recent this picture is, but this is a picture of that building. And I'm guessing it to be about a 6-story building, I guess. So
Did they have that whole building or just a space inside?
I think they probably just had a floor or part of a floor because we know that they had going back, they had the Windsor and they had the Regal and they had that little 60-foot Liberty track that the early pictures were taken like in the showroom. So anyway, they had this, and after when they started having problems or business started slowing down, then they moved into a smaller building in Santa Monica, and this is what the building looks like today. And today it's actually a recording studio. So, they claimed it was their warehouse and stuff, and I don't know, it doesn't look that big. So, but that's where they were at the end. So you're going to probably say, what are you doing with this picture? Today, this is the Diana Beauty Supply, but there's another frontal view, and if you just kind of look at it, but back in the day, 1964, it was the Tom Thumb Model Car Raceway.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so this is another kind of famous picture that floats around out there on the internet, but check it out.
Look at all the kids riding their bikes to the slot car track.
Right, and this had to be like probably a Saturday morning. Track opens at 10 or 9 or noon, and they're all lined up waiting to go inside. So, and then there's another photo inside. And like we said last week, the Tom Thumb Center, which was kind of American Raceway showroom and kind of their it'd be like a training facility if someone wanted to learn about slot car racing, and they could come out there and, American could show them around a little bit and, how a raceway operates and stuff. And so the Raceway opened on November 17th, 1964, and this photo is from that opening day. And the guy on the left is Bert Lane, who was he ran the center. He ran the Tom Thumb Center. He was also the vice president of the American Model Racing Congress. The guy in the black suit next to Bert, that is the honorary mayor of Panorama City, California, where the Raceway was. The lady is Miss Panorama City, and the gentleman clear to the, I guess, right in the picture when you're looking at it, he was the president of the Chamber of Commerce.
Wow. Now, if that picture had been taken today, she most guaranteed she would have been in a bikini or something.
Possibly, but it's obviously 4 cars. You only see 3 controllers, and that would be on the yellow track that was at Tom Thumb Hobby, that photo, because when you look at the promo pictures, American sent out the logo behind them was behind the driver's station on the American yellow. So,
yeah, looks like the guy on the left doesn't actually have a controller in his hand. He's just kind of doing the fake little pose. But that's all right.
Maybe a little flag waving.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some American raceways, what I call mega raceways. Raceways that had lots of American tracks. I mean, this is Playland, okay, the world famous Playland, where the first Purple Mile Sovereign American track was, and that's what the Raceway looked like. And then the Raceway closed in 1969, and it became a concert hall or concert venue, and it was called Family Dog on the Great Highway because the main road in front of Playland and everything was called the Great Highway. And so this became a concert hall, and their first act in 1969 was the Jefferson Airplane. Okay, wow. So the Jefferson Airplane played the first night in the building that Playland was in after they closed. Just an interesting tidbit of some information I dug up. So at Playland, there again, there's the famous Purple Mile. And if you notice in this photo, it almost looks like it's blue. It's not purple. Like the outer walls are blue. Okay? And this photo is at Playland on their Regal course. And this photo was actually used in a Life magazine back in the 60s. Like Life magazine, I don't know if they did something about slot car racing or Playland specific.
I love the scenery in the middle, too.
Yeah, and it's a good action shot with cars. You got 3 cars out of the slot, and this one here, I can't tell if it's in or out. And this guy here is coming through. And if you notice, like, the direction of the cars, they're running the Regal backwards.
Right.
Okay, in this shot. So I don't know if, Playland ran their Regal backwards, or maybe they just did it for this type of promo shot. But that's a Regal, and that's going the wrong direction. So, and that's another shot from Playland. They had the Regal, and they had the Windsor. They had an American Red. I'm going to go back to that picture, but here's another shot. So here's the orange down here, and there's the Purple Mile. I like kind of how they have the little stanchions there, so people can't be down there in the bank area.
It looks like there's plexiglass too coming up from the bank.
Well, that's plexiglass to keep the cars in play, as I always say. It's like a hockey rink. Over here is the red. Back here is the orange, and back here where we can't see would be where the Regal was. So, going back to this, what's interesting is when you look at their schedule of events. Over here on the right, you've got what track they're running things on. So you've got the red, the orange, red, orange, red, blue, red, orange, black, yellow, orange. So, even though the track was purple, they called it a blue, which is kind of bizarre. And I think a lot of people online sometimes, you see stories where the Purple Mile at Playland was blue. Well, No, it was purple. But another mystery could be it was originally blue, and at some time maybe they recovered it and made it purple. But
and if you notice, they classified their classes.
Yes.
Some of them, like if you had 0 to 10 hours on the track, you could race that. If you had 11 to 25 hours on the track, you could race.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had Guy and Gal, they had Power Puff, they had everybody. And then, like the classic cars, I mean, stock Mabuchi's 500 series, Rust Kit 22, Revell 500.
So
they were doing some
if
classic.
you had like 27 hours on a track, and then you came to this place,
well,
what would you run? Would you have to start all over, or would you have to show them like your booklet?
I don't know. I don't know how that was set up. Maybe someone will write in and tell us and maybe you raced there a lot. But I guess if you went there and you had your booklet from another raceway and you had 27 hours, they might let you race on it. Let's say you raced at a raceway and it was a red track and you had 27 hours and you had your book and they knew you raced on a red track. They might let you race. I don't know. But that's a good question. So, like I said, there's the other that we show, and this is the opposite view of the view we just had. So, Purple Mile, and of course back here you can't see is the orange, the red, the yellow, and the Regal. And it lasted about 4 to 5 years. They opened, in 65, early 65, and were gone sometime in 68. So, when Playland closed up, those tracks, all 5 of those tracks, went to Bel Air, Texas. And Richard Hoffer, Richard, and he actually raced at this raceway. And the legend has it, the Playland tracks came here, set up. This raceway wasn't open very long before the owners lost the lease on the building. So the tracks went into storage, and they sat in storage for a very, very long time, like from 1970, 71-ish until 1980, when Doc from Odessa, Texas, took the tracks. And as far as I know, Doc, the only track he set up was the Regal track. And when he set the Regal track up, he put the donut or the eclair off the Purple Mile onto the Regal track. And Richard raced on this track in this configuration. Then when Peter Lentros went out and got the Purple Mile, they had to take this eclair off of this track and ship it with the rest of the Purple Mile to Massachusetts. And I've seen pictures, like once they got all the pieces to Modelville there in Ashland, and they set them up on the floor, like not bolted together but set up. All the sections have black surface except the eclair, and it's this light gray color. So, I've always heard people say, well, you could bolt different sections of American tracks together. Well, there's proof to me that at least you could put the eclair onto a Royal or a Regal, and probably a Royal too, and maybe even a Blue King for all we know. So it's just kind of a cool track. It'd be cool to run on that. So the next kind of mega American Raceways raceway we'll talk about, this is International Model Racing Car and Hobby Center in Chamblee, Georgia, down in your neck of the woods. They had a Purple Mile, and they had 5 American tracks, and they had a Purple Mile, they had a Regal, they had a Queen figure 8. I don't know what the other 2 tracks were. Nothing's mentioned in the article what the other 2 tracks were, but they had 5 American Raceway tracks, according to the article. So,
and for some of the newer racers who've probably raced a Champion chassis when they started racing, Champion was originally called Champion of Chamblee.
Yep.
Which
is in the city of Chamblee.
Same place, right.
Right. So, yeah, the world famous Champion racing in slot cars was born and in Chamblee for I don't know how many, quite a while. And then I know once Bob Rule bought it, I know that it moved elsewhere. So,
But most likely, it probably started, or the people who started it maybe raced here or met here or something.
I'm sure this was a favorite stomping ground of Team Champion back in the day. Right. I mean, this came from the May 1966 Model Car and Track magazine. So we're in the middle of the heyday and Champion's heyday, and it's a May 66 publication. So this article was probably wrote in January or February of 66. So, just another mega raceway. And there's another queen, Miss International Model Car. She's sitting there with one of those American Raceway perpetual trophies, the 48-inch model. So, Ralph, if you're looking for a hot date this Friday, maybe you need to go look up Jane Stepp and see what she's doing.
Notice she has full-length pants on also.
Yep, she could be your racing queen, buddy. So, there you go. But I think the largest American raceway of the day, and it really wasn't an American raceway. They had American tracks there, but in West Hempstead, New York, that was the home of Aurora, which world famous for HO cars. And Aurora opened a raceway, and it had 6 American tracks in it, and it had one custom-built track that was in the basement. And that was for the Grumman Northrop employees, which they did a lot of defense contract work and stuff back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But their engineers and stuff would go there because that track was kind of a club track. The only people who could run on it was the employees and are their guests or friends. So at Aurora, they had a Regal. They had a Blue King. They had 2 red tracks. They had a yellow, and then they had a hill climb with steering wheels. And there is an article like in the October 65 issue of one of the magazines, and Carroll Shelby was there, and Howie Ersner was there. And it might have been a Minra race. So, right there's 7 American Raceway packs. So they probably powered the track in the basement with the American pack too. But there's 7 tracks in one building. So, and part of this article too, it goes on about at this time of this article, they called them slot parlors, not tracks. Now number more than 3,000. At last and tardy count, there was 10 million Americans were slot racing at commercial tracks. More than 20 million home sets had been sold. And the HIA, which is the Hobby Industries Association, which was really the I can't remember the other part of it, but of America, they estimated 100 million Americans have been exposed to the sport. Big names and big money are in it. Walt Disney owns a sports center in Denver, and we have a story about that, with one of the longest slot car raceways in the U.S. The American Broadcasting Company, which would be ABC as we know it today, owns an interest in a slot parlor in West Hempstead, New York. So, here's another one of those unanswered questions. Did ABC actually have money in the Aurora Raceway that was in West Hempstead? Because it was 7 raceways. It had to be the biggest raceway if there were more than just one in West Hempstead. And, Ford Motor was involved with some of the championships, and Chrysler was, and, a lot of big car companies at the time was involved in slot racing in some way. I think in 1970 in the Ed Sullivan Show, they had like some kind of a national HO race or some type of race on there where somebody won a Ford and stuff. And there was more of those races too. You can find them on YouTube and stuff, but they kind of started in 64, 65. And I think there was one a year probably up until 1970. So, there was a lot of exposure, and that stuff was mainly HO, but there was a few 32nd or 24th deals like that. So, when we talk about the Raceway in Denver, Colorado, the complex was known as Celebrity Sports, and Celebrity Sports had the Raceway, and this is a patch that I guess they probably sold or gave away to their winners or whatever. But they had 3 tracks down the basement. It was actually called Celebrity Sports Raceway, and it was inside this bigger complex. I mean, they had 80 lanes of bowling. They had an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They had all kinds of stuff. And the claim back in the day was they had 85 entries on a weekly race program. And, it says that it was built by Walt Disney. Estimated cost of the operation was $250,000, 13,000 square feet. And they have 3 international tracks. And I've never heard of a brand of tracks called International. I've never seen anything for international tracks. And the track that they're showing there is called the Daytona. But the largest track was over 270 feet, I read somewhere else, and they called it the Tubby. So I never heard of anybody, because when I heard Daytona, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a Revell track or something, because they had a Sebring and some other. I mean, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I never heard of any track called the Daytona by any.
I was wondering if maybe that's what they meant. Maybe they have tracks designed
right
based on real racetracks internationally.
Right. But then, their biggest track was called the Tubby. So, again. So, here's this is a Wikipedia thing, and yes, it doesn't look that good, but Celebrity Sports Center was opened in 1960, and it operated continuously for 34 years before closing in 1994. Now, I don't know if the tracks were still there. I don't know anybody that said they ever raced or went to Celebrity Raceways. But, Mike Fleming, I think, asked about it, said he went there as a kid or something, like on a family vacation. But anyway, the original investors were Walt Disney, Jack Benny, Bing Crosby, George Burns, Charles Lofton, Burl Ives, Art Linkletter, John Payne, Spike Jones, and Jim and Marion Jordan, which the last 3 or 4 of them I've never heard of. But I definitely, growing up, being a kid of the 60s and 70s, remember Art Linkletter and Burl Ives and George Burns and Bing Crosby and Jack Benny. So, I mean, those were heavy hitter guys there. I mean, they've been in the movies and TV for years and had lots of money. So, and it says they built the complex at a cost of $6 million in 1960. So, that'd be like 60 plus million in today's dollars. So, and then of course it was all gone by 1994, I think, when they tore it all down. So, and I think they're actually rebuilding it, making a new Celebrity Sports Center. Now, this picture is from the hobby industry. That's the I was looking for earlier. HIA, which was the Hobby Industry of America. They had their annual show every year in Chicago. Manufacturers of slot cars and anything hobby related would go to this show and display. Some of our viewers might be familiar with like the Richter show, which was the radio controlled show. That kind of took over the HIA show. HIA went on, but they were more into crafts than they were hobbies. So there was a split sometime in the 80s, I think. But this was from 1966. This was in the basement of where the show was taking place, or maybe at a hotel close by. But, they had their new American Aristocrat hill climb proudly displayed with steering wheels and the race director. Yeah. And in the background, they must either had a couple other tracks, because I can see 2 other race directors way in the back.
What's interesting is this is not a deluxe model, but they upgraded it to the steering wheels and pedals. Right.
Because, last week I showed on the price list that this track wasn't available in deluxe color, or in a deluxe model. But then I have another price list that was July of 66. In the June of 66 price list, this track was available in deluxe. So when they first started production on them, they were all Econoline versions. So now, many of you probably know the famous NASCAR racer, Red Farmer. And Red Farmer today is in his 80s. He still races dirt late models. He got hurt a year or two ago pretty bad, but he's still racing. And he was one of the original members of the Alabama gang from Hueytown, Alabama. And he had a raceway somewhere in Alabama, but he had an American Red. And it was called Red Farmer Model Car Raceways Incorporated, now open 4 big tracks. So, and it was inside a bowling alley. So, people always say that slot tracks and bowling alleys were kind of all together, but they weren't. There were some tracks that were in bowling alleys, some were their own deals, but I mean, it does make an interesting combination. And a lot of people think that ties in American Raceways to AMF as being either owned by AMF or AMF owned it and called it something else. That we don't know. I don't have any proof of that. I've never seen any direct proof that AMF ever owned American Raceways or set them up. And I mean, there's some stuff floating out there that American Raceways was started in 1962 by some former AMF employees. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But there's really no proof of that. Classic Speedway. Classic. Hey, Ralph, is that your daddy's caddy out front or what?
That's right.
Okay. So Classic was a maker of ready-to-run cars and parts and stuff in the 60s. And they also had a raceway, and they called it Classic Speedway. And I think they had some American tracks there, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I've read a little bit, here and there. And some of the guys from California would probably know this for sure if they raced back in the day. But Classic had a speedway. And then after the raceway closed, it became the Classic Speed Wash, which is a laundromat. So
nice.
Okay. So if you notice, Speedway became Speed Wash. So they removed the Y. Well, actually, they turned the Y upside down and put it on the end to make an H. And they added an S in there and came up with Speed Wash. So I'll flip back to that. So there's our Y that becomes an H. And you put an S in between, and you've got Speed Wash. So as far as I know, it's still there in business to this day. And this is another promo shot from the Tom Thumb Panorama City American Raceway Training Center, I'll call it now. But, there you go. Chicks Dig Slot Cars too. There's proof of it. So it's kind of cool. They got their cars and they got their little cigar box. Well, it looks like she has a cigar box, and this one has like some kind of little tackle box. And, there's the ashtray there, and it's just, the stools and everything. I mean, it's just a cool classic shot of younger people having fun with slot cars in the 60s. And who knows, they might have rode their bikes and was waiting outside for the raceway to get open. And this is just another classic shot of probably a one-track raceway back in the day, American Orange track. Everybody's on a lane. You got people sitting around waiting. This could be a race. It could just be a night of practice. But, a lot of raceways you'd have to call in and make reservations to be able to get track time. So you'd call in and say, I want to come in Saturday afternoon, and what times do you have open? And you'd make a reservation just like you were going to dinner. So, and if you didn't, you weren't going to get on the track. So you asked last week who was on the
Congress,
yeah. American Model Racing Congress. So Denny Dennison was the president, and Burt Lane, who we've seen earlier, he was the vice president. Frank Baldwin was the racing commissioner. Sam Hanks, who I believe was an Indy 500 winner one time, he was the director of racing.
Wow,
the board of racing governors was Don Garlitz, Phil Hill, Parnelli Jones, Fred Lorenzen, Tony Nancy, Richard Petty, Jim Rathman, who was also, I believe he won the Indy 500 in 1963, if I remember right. Lloyd Ruby, and Roger Ward. So those were like the big time, racers back in 65, 66 and real life racing. So, Garlitz was a drag racer, and Of course, Fred and Richard Petty. Fred and Richard were stock car drivers, and the rest of them, were kind of like open wheel kind of guys. But Parnelli Joan raced stock cars too every now and then too. So
Yeah.
especially out at Riverside. So, and then this is just a picture of the 1966 Southern California Model Car Racing Championships, which was conducted by the American Model Congress. So American Model Car Congress. So that will be for another show. We'll go into some more detail about how that and some of the other organizations back in the day got started, as well as like the first, slot car nationals and USRA and some of the other stuff that's come along since. So, but that's for another episode. And then this picture, the reason I put this picture in here is this is a Blue King track, American Blue King economy version, and like this is at Hanks, which is now closed, Hanks in Wisconsin up by Milwaukee, Beloit, and I raced on this track in the early '80s, and but it was the first, and it's the only American King I ever seen in an Econoline version.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever seen one, even in a picture.
Yeah, so there you are. They existed. So moving along. So now we're going to get into the AMF story. And, AMF basically got a license from American Raceways to build or copy their tracks and sell them throughout the world, but they couldn't be sold back into Canada or the United States. And this came from the British magazine Model Cars. This was reprinted from that issue from August 1966, and you can see the AMF. This was probably an AMF promotional deal. They reprinted it from the magazine, and they used it to try and sell tracks or raceways. So this top picture, again, that is a still photo from the famous video on YouTube where it shows them running on the King track, the men and the ladies with the steering wheels. If you look, there's an AMF banner in the back. They had a different type automatic race director. This is for a 4-lane track, which we'll show you a picture of. And here's a timer for a 4-lane track. And then here's the donut of the King and American Raceway. American Raceway race director. And unlike some of the companies who have been promoting commercial circuits in an explorative manner in England already, AMF had no teething troubles to overcome. On sound business principles, they have acquired a world license outside the USA and Canada to manufacture what has proved to be America's most popular system produced by American Model Car Raceways Incorporated. In connection with their other manufacturing interests, AMF already have 4 factories in this country, so that there will be no question of importing tracks at high freight costs. The whole European market will be supplied from England, making a substantial export contribution to the economy, as is already the case with their 10-pin bowling machinery and accessories. So,
now, do we know what they paid for this license?
No idea. I don't know. I never heard. I've never seen anything in writing. But, they talk about having 4 factories, okay? And those 4 factories that AMF already had in England, basically they kind of started in the 1950s in the defense industry. And they made LP gas equipment, they made bowling equipment, they made tobacco machinery, they made electrical products, industrial and food machines, and recreational equipment. So they was already making all that stuff prior to starting to make the American Raceway tracks at those facilities over there. And this little 4-lane, this is going to be an interesting story because AMF built these tracks in England. American Raceways was never known to build this type of track in the United States. Okay, so again, what was you going to say?
What was the name of it?
Well, I don't know if there was ever a name of that little raceway or that little racetrack. I have no idea. I've never seen a name for it. So anyway, here it is again, smaller AMF circuit now being built in this country under license. A good twisty for fun course. And I would say this was probably more of like an amusement type track, you know, was maybe set up like in arcades or like amusement type centers.
Right.
So, you know, and then, you know, here's another article about AMF International Limited to build and sell model car raceways in Britain. And
same picture used.
Yeah. And then, you know, here's Europe's first AMF raceway opens in London. So the first AMF raceway opened in London. Again, not owned by AMF, but it was their tracks. And then this story, I think, was about a year later after the other two articles. And it says, from Hammersmith to Hong Kong, AMF's share of the raceway business is growing fast, with a strong prospect now of a slot racing world championship, which never really materialized as far as American Raceways or AMF or, you know, any involvement there. It just never happened. So this article goes on about how this article is a year later, and since their entry in the raceway business and then to the opening at Hammersmith of the first AMF-equipped center in Europe, a great deal of ground has been covered. To date, centers using AMF equipment have been opened in Rome, London, Paris, Geneva, Copenhagen, Cape Town, Perranporth, Brighton, Milan, Hong Kong, and Blackpool. Similar centers are due to open between now and September in Malta, Persia, Manchester, Tottenham, Bangkok, and Venezuela. So, and then it says there's more, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Lebanon, Spain, and South Africa. So, we know that there is a American Royal that's still, I don't know if it's actually in Paris, but it is in France. There's YouTube videos on that. They have kind of an annual big race that they kind of put on every year. And we know that Tottenham had a track. And so this, I'm trying to think what this also says in this article of interest. There's centers at Hammersmith, Perranporth, Brighton, and Blackpool. Shortly there will be operations in Manchester and Tottenham. The Grand Prix Model Raceway Center at Hammersmith, fully reported in our January 67 issue, has been in business now for some 8 months and has firmly and successfully established itself. I think about a year later they were gone. So, you know, over there, over here, they come and go. Now, this is a magazine advertisement for Tottenham Model Raceways. When they opened, they had American Blue King, and they had an orange track, the Monarch. And at some point, they removed the Monarch, and Tottenham is kind of famous because they were more of like a pro racing center. And Bob Emmett went over there in either 1967 or 1968. And I think he was driving for Team Champion and put on quite a whipping on him and kind of showed him what American pro racing was. I mean, I think the other guys were close, but Bob had just raced pro for so long and you know, he was just a leg up on those guys. So from what I could dig up, there was 3 kings in the UK over time. You had one in Blackpool, you had Hammersmith had one, and then Tottenham. And then the Tottenham King in orange went down to Wonderland. And Wonderland was kind of like a resort area, vacation spot. And that track was there, I think, up until sometime in the 80s, the King track. But it wasn't in really good shape. And I don't know whatever happened to the orange, but you know, that's kind of what happened to the old Tottenham track from what I've gathered. So, and if anyone has a different story, feel free to write me and tell me. But I'm pretty sure that's what my research kind of showed up. So now this is the original Purple Mile that was at Ashland, Massachusetts back in the day. This was Peter Lentros's first Purple Mile, and it's the Econo version. And the reason I put this picture in here is because I'm going to show you an AMF Purple Mile that was in Rome. But again, you've got the plexiglass down here in the bank. So there was no ledge. Like on American Blue King, like at Tom Thumb, you've got the ledge on the bank. You can kind of go down there and lean on, but it keeps the cars from going out of the ballpark if they just slot in the bank. You know what I'm talking about, right, Ralph?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the AMF Purple Mile or Sovereign that was in Rome. And as you can tell, it has a ledge.
And you can ask Howie.
Yeah. And see, here's
not kind to cars.
Right, here's kind of, and you know what, in the Purple Mile was down there in Georgia back in 1990, 89, 90, 91, Georgia Hobby Center. That track had a ledge on it, or a cap. I like to call it a cap. But if you notice, and it's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but
it doesn't look like there's one though.
Well, there's not one there. But it's like the Purple Mile at Ashland today. In the center of the bank, like right here, it's almost like it's diamond. Like the car kind of goes up and then it goes down. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Where I remember the Georgia Hobby Center, and like this one, where there's no diamond in there at all. It's just a nice radius.
Higher radius, right?
Right. It doesn't diamond. So,
and those are steep banks too.
Oh, they're like 60 degrees, I think, or 65 degrees. Yeah. So, yeah, they're very, very steep, and they're very tall. Like, I know at Modelville, if I go down the bank and stand there, like the top of the wall without the plexiglass is right about chin level on me. So, it's really up there. Where at the King, like at Tom Thumb, I can go up there and kind of put my arms up there and kind of stand there, and
right,
it's not up to my chin. So, and then this is another shot of the Sovereign that was in Rome, and I think we got one more shot. Yeah, there's another shot of it. So,
wow. That shot just really makes that track look huge.
Right. Yeah, it kind of puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
About how long that walk is down to that first dead man. So, and then back to our little track again, AMF. I've read articles where they had these tracks in department stores, kind of like a promotional deal back in the UK, like Harrods, the famous department store Harrods there in England. They had one up for a short time. Rumor is that this particular track here, or one of these tracks, again, we don't know how many were built, okay?
Right.
But one of them actually wound up and still may be in Australia to this day.
Huh.
So there's research being done on that right now, and I don't think anything's turned up. And then here's another picture of same type track. Don't know if this was in a hobby shop or if it's in a department store, but it's obviously in some kind of like a store location, or because you just see other things. And then this is where the story gets interesting. So a couple weeks ago, John Miller, the guy that owns Pro Slot, he sends me this picture. He sends a text to me. He says, check out this American track. We used to race on this in this guy's basement in Hartford, Michigan. And I'm like, wow, how did that get in the United States? Because, the story is those were all made in Europe or in England, okay? So that's what the track looked like at one time. And now notice the controller panel.
That's what I was just looking at. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know what lanes. I think it's green, orange, blue, and yellow. There's no red or white or purple. It's a 4-lane track.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got this part of the controller panel that kind of wraps around this turn. And this little button right here would be for an automatic race director. It's like you got 4 guys at the panel. You want to start the race. You push the button, click, 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 click. It resets the counter. 4 bells, ding, 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 ding. Power comes on. I think you could run 1 minute, 2 minute. I think you might be able to run up to 9-minute heats on those because you could adjust them. So John also sent this picture, and this is the track restored. And I don't know if this is the current. I don't know if this is an older picture, but the guy restored the track. Now I'll take this back. We've got here we go. We've got
red, white, green, orange.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the track restored, and he's definitely made a different panel. It looks like for the controller hookups.
Yeah, because it doesn't wrap around the side. It's
the Econo version. It's got the yellow cap on top of the wall, like all American Econos had. So, and this track is supposedly set up and running in this guy's basement as we speak, somewhere around Hartford, Michigan. So,
wow.
Okay, so then the plot thickens more because another one of these tracks is in Canada.
That one looks a lot bigger.
Well, the person that owns this track added these two sections here and in the straightaway to stretch the track to be able to get in here better to marshal cars, and it's not so tight and curvy and squeezed together. Now, I talked to Ernie Mazzei last week, and I asked him about this track, and he says, sure, and he mentioned the guy's name that originally owned it, and he'd had it for 30 or 40 years. But Ernie doesn't know the story of where it came from, how he got it. But the serial number on this track, is 124-L. And like I said before, the L stands for Los Angeles in the American coding system. So,
wonder if it could stand for London, though.
Well, and there again, you might have something. But the thing is, along with the track John's friend has, John Miller's friend, in this track, if we had a picture of the panel, the plate, the hookup plate, the colored plate, if it said AMF on it, you would know it was an AMF track made in England.
Right.
If it said American Raceways, it was made here. So the plot thickens now. And if they were made in England, how did the one track get to Canada? But again, there was a license. But once American Raceway was gone, AMF was free to probably ship wherever they wanted to.
Right. So, yeah.
We got to find out more, and hopefully we'll find this out. We'll get to the bottom of it.
Well, one of the cool things about last week's show is so many people came out with like lots of information,
right?
Their stories, information, and all kinds of cool things like that. So maybe we'll be able to uncover some stuff this week.
So AMF, and I don't know if along with American or without, AMF also got into the coin-op game or coin-op business with slot car tracks. And one was American Speedway, or a game they called American Speedway. And this is a small picture, but I got a bigger picture. But this was like an arcade-type game. And you had 2 drivers, 2 cars, and you had a track inside. I don't know. It doesn't look like there's glass on top, so I guess you could probably get a hold of the cars and put them back on if they fell out. But, it was like a kind of a racing game for 2 people, and those were actual slot cars. And there's an actual picture of a track. And these are kind of collectible type items.
Now, how many of these things exist?
Well, we don't know.
Do any that we know of exist?
Oh yeah, because these pictures are ones that people have found and restored.
Wow.
And then they had the American Indy. That was the 2-1 was called American Speedway. They had a single player game, and you can see it's a coin-op, and it was called American Indy. And sorry about the pictures, that's as big as we get. But this was just a 1-lane, 1 car, 1 driver, and you probably raced distance against time or something, I would imagine. But, there's the famous AMF steering wheel. And these were sold by AMF in the United States. So, and I believe they came out with American Indy in 1965, if I remember correctly. So, and then moving along, we go to StromBecker Raceways. And StromBecker was a famous, what do I want to say? maker of cars, 1/32 scale and 1/24 scale.
Yeah, they manufactured like ready to run cars.
Yeah,
right.
and they made home set tracks. So they also opened a raceway in the Chicago area, and here's a picture. A report of the StromBecker Raceways, because they wanted to sell tracks. And I don't know how many StromBecker Raceways there were out there in the United States or how many tracks they made or sold, but they definitely entered into the market. And it's kind of a similar layout, kind of reverse similar layout to an American Yellow.
Now that thing says that you get the track, the lap counter.
Yeah. Well, I think
$350.
I can't.
No, $3,350.
Okay, so there's another picture of that track, the StromBecker track, and I don't know if they made different models or not, but that's pretty much all I dug up on StromBecker. So if anybody knows if StromBecker made different types or different layouts, let us know. But I didn't find any pictures of any other ones, and I think this was a very short-lived deal with StromBecker. So American's biggest competition, maybe, or their closest competition, was the miniature Grand Prix racing centers, or American Grand Prix racing raceways. This came out of the October '64 Model Car Science. They were a company that wanted to sell you turnkey, ready-to-go raceways. At this point, in October '64, they already had 5 of their own raceways in the California area. They had one in Reseda, one in Orange, one in Van Nuys, Costa Mesa, and Granada Hills, California. And J. Warren Hall and Associates was kind of like the one who was pushing the franchise deal, and they were kind of the PR firm, if you will, for Miniature Grand Prix Racing Center. So I thought, well, who's J. Warren Hall? And I looked up J. Warren Hall, and J. Warren Hall, I don't know if it's the same guy or not, but he was an actor, a movie and a TV actor, television actor. He was pretty popular in the 40s and 50s. He kind of retired in the 50s. And then in 60 or 61, he came out of retirement to host a game show that was on in the early 60s. And, maybe it was him. I mean, he's in California doing a game show. He definitely knows how to set up a PR firm, or maybe had a PR firm of his own, so maybe he got involved. I don't know. But J. Warren Hall was an actor, but I don't know if this is the same guy or not. So they sold tracks and offered raceways. And I got a better picture, but they said resin plastic sealed monocoque construction, kind of like a honeycomb type construction. And they were braided with friction-free Teflon. Okay, so... and this is another article showing that track. This was, I guess this would have been the 6th raceway at La Punta, California. And there's the official J. Warren Hall crest watches over the action. So Miniature Grand Prix offers more space-age electronic lap counters, power packs, and voltage regulators. Decorator designs display counter stands, back counter signs, cabinets. You get America's most attractive store interior, brings in the family trade. Miniature Grand Prix supplies you with a fully equipped, ultra-modern raceway center ready to open for business in a selected location. So they were definitely pushing the franchise thing, or, complete raceways. And, they also ensured your success with operator training, courses in merchandising, small business management, and race event stewardship. And either of 2 training centers. So they were using some of their raceways as training centers, just kind of like American was with Tom Thumb. And then, you would get regular visits by trained MGP field directors, installation of tracks and equipment by trained factory engineers. unlimited consultation privileges. You know, they were trying to offer the whole thing, and then they were tied in with the Model Car Racing Association, which was known as MCRA, which I don't think ever really did much of anything. And I want you to pay attention to this logo right here, MGP with the steering wheel.
Steering wheel, yeah.
The little car. So new for 66, model MGP tracks feature honeycomb core construction, Teflon braided slots. The honeycomb core is a principle long used by the aircraft industry to secure lightness with great strength. Our 66 models are 75% lighter than conventional tracks and twice as strong. But I think this is like this. This kind of cracks me up. I think this is Teflon braid is another breakthrough by MGP, friction-free and practically wear-proof. Miracle Teflon, just released to us for braiding applications, puts an end to the slot drag and the constant inspection necessary with now obsolete products. So I guess you didn't need braid juice back in the day with their tracks. You know, they were just so slick that nothing would make them slicker. You know,
no braid juice, no braid irons to repair the tracks.
Yeah. So then there was MGN Raceways. Now, like I said, if you notice that logo, you know, there's the old crest over there, and here's that logo. The Indy car is not there, but there's a car up here. It's got the steering wheel. It's got the checkered flags. But this is MGN Raceways, and it was Miniature Grand National Raceways Limited out of High Point, North Carolina. The finest time-proven tracks on the market. Central location on the eastern seaboard to serve you. Men with years of experience in this business. A complete package are individual tracks and accessories. So I don't know if they were like kind of maybe a East Coast branch of MGP or what, but I mean there's a lot of similarities there, and I couldn't find any photos of any MGN tracks to see if they were different from MGP, but there's another builder that was offering back in the 60s. And then we had the custom line model raceways out of New Jersey. And if you notice, this track is similar to an American King or Red, except you don't really have a dead man. You kind of just got an S-curve here where the dead man and the finger would be, and it's all flat.
Well, it sort of looks like a halfway between a Royal and a King.
Well, and you know, it's more of a Red because it's kind of got a narrow bank. It looks to have a round donut, really kind of small donut. And it's gonna look similar to another track when we get there in some ways. And another company we're going to talk about here in a few is a company called Race A Go-Go, which made tracks, and they're, we'll call it a King track, but they didn't call it a King, but their similar type King track was looked like this. So back, you know, here's MGP again, and I got those kind of out of order. Sorry about that, but you know, they, from what I can tell, they offered about 3 different models at one time. I don't know if they offered any more than that, but they were Formica side. And I think in one of those ads, it said that they didn't even offer an econo version. So, and then there's another MGP track and the other MGP, which again, this is kind of like in between a Windsor and the StromBecker track. I mean, S is kind of the flat bank on the end, a donut, and a top turn, except this one goes a little bit further out and around. So, and then, oh, I don't know what I put this pool table in here for, but anyway, this is a pool table, coin-op pool table. And a lot of people probably don't know this, but Alltech, the track maker, made pool tables. That's what their business was before they got into slot car tracks, okay? So this ad's from 69 and 70, but Alltech was making pool tables back in the late 50s and going forward. So, you know, Alltech, from what I can gather, they only offered 3 different styles of raceways. And This was called the Challenger, and I got a little bit bigger picture, but it was 100-foot lanes, 20-degree banks, and I would say one hookup panel was on this side, and the other one was probably over here. You kind of got a 180 bank turn here and kind of a down the hill. Well, maybe you went up the hill too. I don't know which way you went, but it's not really a 180 turn. It's kind of a D-shaped type turn.
Right.
They had the big bend, which again kind of looks like a king or a red, more of a red, because it has kind of here. Let's go to this picture. Tight, narrow bank, not too banked of a dead man or finger, and then this donut is kind of in a long D. Remember, the red was kind of a shorter.
You got that big downhill on the straightaway, then back going up before you get to the bank.
Yeah. Okay, and then, of course, the Titan 220, which we all know is – everybody thinks that's an Engelmann track. And the truth be known is Stan Engelmann worked for Alltech. And, at some point, from what I can tell, Stan might have worked for – he might have built tracks at Alltech and also built tracks on the side. But eventually he left Alltech. And we don't know if he left Alltech and then Alltech quit making tracks, or Alltech quit making tracks and he left. But those two were together at one time. And then Alltech, or not Alltech, Engelmann over the years, then he worked out of Virginia. And then eventually at the end, I think he worked out of El Paso, Texas.
I think Alltech was out of Florida, right? Hialeah?
Yeah.
Florida, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And another story was how you tell the difference between an Alltech and an Engelmann. Alltech never made tracks with S's. Engelmann made track with S.
Right. And we only know of one Alltech standing, and that's in Pennsylvania.
Yes. At
Trains and Lanes.
Trains and Lanes in Easton, Pennsylvania. And they have, like you said, as far as I know, it's the only up and running Alltech. And then, as far as I know, I think there's two Engelmanns up and running. One is at Jim Honeycutt's down in San Antonio, Texas. And I think there's another one up in Minnesota. Maybe it's Scale Model Raceways or something like that.
Now, there's a lot of tracks we call Engelmanns, but
right.
We mean like true, built by.
Well, and the Titan track are what a lot of people refer to as a C track. Because I guess if you look at it, it's like a C somehow.
Yeah, it is.
That's what Alltech and Engelmann made famous. Okay, so, and I think, as far as I know, Engelmann didn't really build anything other than a C-type track, except for the two smaller tracks that was Elmsford Raceway, because the Elmsford Nuvolari was an Engelmann track.
It's because you could fit so much track length inside that space.
Right. And see, and that's another thing too. The Elmsford Engelmann, or the Nuvolari, was very tight, and it was made to fit down in the basement in a certain area. So it was not like a standard Engelmann C track. It was kind of a custom because it was made to fit, and it had an S section through here. But this is like a reversed. This is a reversed Elmsford track, because Elmsford track, it's hard to. This is a mirror image, basically, is what it is. So, and then Alltech also made coin-op, like kind of writing machines. Okay, like. You probably rode some of this stuff when you were a kid, maybe. I know I did. I don't really remember the racer, but I definitely remember riding on ponies and stuff like that. The grocery store or something, put your quarter. Well, I guess it was a dime back then, and thing can run you for a minute or whatever. But Alltech made this type stuff before, during, and as far as I can tell, after they got out of the slot car track business. So, coin ops and pool tables and slot car tracks. And, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with the slot car tracks and the pool tables. I mean, they made pool tables. They're made out of wood and slate. slot car tracks made out of wood. So now, John Miller also sent me this stuff a couple weeks ago, and this was kind of interesting because this is a company called Mike Moon's Corporation, located in New York, New York. And Mike Moon's Corporation was a distributor of coin-op equipment, okay, like all those rides and pool tables and coin changer, anything you could stick a coin in. This Mike Moon's guy, he distributed those machines, fortune teller machines, all kinds of stuff. So at one point, Mike Moon's was basically selling Alltech tracks, which he was probably already selling Alltech pool tables. So, you know, he's pushing slot car tracks. And kind of what's funny is, you know, when you see this, you think that, you know, Mike Moon's here is making these tracks or whatever. But basically, he was just taking the Alltech promotional pictures. See, that's the Challenger again. And again, like I said, there's the other 4 hookups on the other side. And this is a different view. But he's just put.
I like that layout, actually.
That's pretty cool, yeah. But he's put his company name over the top of the Alltech.
Right.
So people couldn't call Alltech and get it direct, you know, they'd bypass him. So, you know, here's the Big Ben, and again, he's put his name over the Alltech thing.
And now the Alltech one, I think the price was, you know, $3,300. I know he's at $4,500.
Okay, well, let's go check that out.
Well, that's for the Big Ben. Okay, so his Challenger track is actually cheaper, it looks like.
Okay, so that Titan, 220-foot Titan, $6,600. Okay. I don't have a price. Yeah, no prices on the. So we'll go back over here. So, you know, there's a Challenger, and there's Big Ben, and there's a Titan, and that's actually a better picture of the Titan, or you know,
it's a big track too.
It is a big track. And you know, and another thing that I read too was,
so is this the tracker they have at Trains and Lanes?
I would imagine they have. Yeah, I don't know if it's that actual track. See,
but it's a Titan, though, is what I'm saying, right?
Yes, it would be a Titan as long as it's an Alltech. And see, Engelmann made 180 long, 220 long, and 200 long C tracks. You know, this is a C track. But the 200 version was a mirror image like Elmsford, okay? Like you could get this track in 220 or 180. The 200-foot track, which would be shorter, and I believe Elmsford is 200 foot, it was a reverse image, meaning you came out of the bank and you went into like this turn, okay? Right. Came out of the bank over here, and all this was over there, and then there was an S section in here before you came around, or before you, yeah, see, it's, yeah. No, you came through, and then you had an S section, then down to the bank. But, of course, Elmsford was reverse of this. I should have got a picture of the Elmsford track, and we could have seen it better. So, yeah, Mike Moon's was a distributor. And at first when I seen all this stuff, I thought, well, here's this guy trying to be selling franchises, which I don't know if he's selling franchises, but he was definitely trying to sell another type of amusement piece of equipment.
Sure, right. You know.
So Sebring, and again, Mike Moon's, this is another small model car raceway non-coin. And then there's a coin version, okay? So, you know, I don't know who Sebring was, no idea. But someone was making these little, like, arcade-type slot car tracks, 4x10-foot floor space. Note, requires less floor space than pool table. 4 micro-covered sides, double wood construction, copper tracks for long-wearing little maintenance. And then this is Nutley's 165-foot Stan Engelmann track. Now, that's a Big Ben track, except instead of 150, it's 165 foot. And if you look at that in Big Bend, it's the same track, just longer. And
again, basically a play on a king track.
Yeah, or a red, kind of a red and a king combined, and it's just a weird donut. And then this track was at Nutley's. And then I think the story was the roof leaked. This track got damaged. They got rid of this track, and then that's when the Blue King went in at Nutley, and Nutley became more world famous back in the day because they had a super fast American King on the East Coast. So this is another Engelmann track. And when I say Elvis the Pelvis, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
This is the Engelmann track that was at Elvis Presley's Graceland.
And that's very similar to the Engelmann that I grew up racing on.
Okay.
Very similar.
But you can see the S section.
Yeah.
So this is okay. And again, here we go. This is basically the Elmsford track. So we do have a mirror image.
Right.
Because Elmsford, you'd come in front of you, come up through the S's, around, down the big straightaway, through the bank, down into the Dead Man, into the 180, and back down under the bridge. So this was probably a 200-foot Engelmann C track. And this is no longer at Graceland, folks. It's long gone. This room is now what they call the trophy room at Graceland. If you've been to Graceland, if you've taken a tour and you went through what they call the...
So what happened on the track?
No idea. And you know what? It could be in storage at Graceland somewhere, and
that's what I would guess. Right.
They just tell people it's gone. But Elvis Presley loved slot cars. I mean, he used to go down to, I can't think of the name of the raceway in Memphis, Tennessee, but he would go down there after midnight, and story was they would tape up newspapers on the windows and stuff so people couldn't look in and see he was in there. And him and his bodyguards and his entourage would show up at midnight and stay till 4 or 5 in the morning running slot cars. And then, eventually Elvis just had a track built at home, probably after the local raceway closed in Memphis. So,
and this was all before he faked his death.
Right. And, it was Robert E. Lee Raceway in Memphis, Tennessee. And that was also the site of what I would call the first slot car nationals in 1967 when Champion had their first Arco Nationals there. Again, more history for another show. And then this was a company called Southland. They made another arcade game, 1-2 players, slot cars, AMF steering wheels. This was from 1965. And I think Southland Engineering made all kinds of arcade games, but they got in on the slot racing thing at one time. And then last week, this was how we ended the show on American Raceways, was with the 16-lane amusement track. And Nelson Swanberg, a viewer and a racer out of Detroit area, he wrote me after show and said there was one of these at Cedar Point in northern Ohio. And I've heard stories. People said, yeah, they used to have a slot car track at Cedar Point and stuff. But again,
what was the name of this one again? I forgot.
There was no name. This was just a 16-lane amusement
track.
So, yeah, they had no name for it. And, again, Cedar Point, I'd heard stories that they had a slot car track there. No one could ever say what it was, what it looked like, had pictures. But I'll take Nelson's word for it that, he's seen one at Cedar Point. And he's not the first person that's told me that they seen, but he said, yeah, that's the track they had at Cedar Point. So, and it makes sense. 16 people, amusement, you probably race for some kind of prize. So now we're going to go to Revell. And, Revell's another famous ready-to-run car company, controller company, home set company. They made slot car racing stuff. They opened a Raceway.
They're still in business to this day, so, model kits too.
Right. Yeah, they got into model kits. But, yeah, Revell Raceway's long gone. But yeah, Revell had a Raceway. And, here's some pictures. And what's kind of funny about the Revell Raceway was Revell started making racetracks, and, of course, they had Revell Raceways inside their store. But they had an American Orange in the store, too. So there was other Revell tracks, but they had one American Orange there. And here's a price list for the tracks. This is from 1966. And Revell offered 6 tracks: the Monza, the Sebring, the Le Mans, the Monaco, the Laguna Seca, and the Grand Prix. So this is what the Monza looked like. Now, I never in my life have seen a Revell track. I've never seen one set up. I've never seen one in storage. I've never really seen one for sale. So I don't know how many Revell tracks. I don't think very many were ever made. And again, if there was lots made, there could be lots in storage, but we don't know. So then there's a Sebring, and you had the Le Mans, you had the Monaco, and they're just like kind of really weird tracks. I mean, they got big dips and humps, and then you had Laguna Seca, and it had 2 crossovers, or what they called traverse turns. And then they had the Grand Prix track, and again, 2 crossovers or traverse turns. Now, the Grand Prix track, there was one of these in France, and for a long time, everybody had this confused with the American Emperor, and they thought that this track in France, Mike Swiss ran on this track in France. Matter of fact, the great J.P. Van Rossum had one of his early IMCA races, and it may not even been called IMCA then, but he had a big race in France on this track, and Swiss raced at that race. Felipe raced on this track back in the 60s when it was in France. And a lot of people have this confused with an emperor, and it's not an emperor. So, many years ago, they finally solved the story that there was no emperor in Europe, and it was a Revell Grand Prix. And I've seen pictures of the track in France, and it is a Revell Grand Prix. Now, here's a hookup panel from a Revell track. And there's their power supply and timer. And what's kind of unique about all the Revell tracks was they offered them in 3 different lengths. They had an A and a B and a C length in each style of track. So basically they were just stretched out longer. Like you can see, like Laguna A, this section is a lot longer than the section on B and C. And then on Monaco, like on this is a very short finger. This is a little bit longer, and then this finger would be longer than these. And, there's the Grand Prix. It was in 3 different lengths, along with all the other tracks. And you can really see by that. And if we go back to that price list, like a Monza Deluxe, the short version was $33, the long version was $3,800, and the longest version was $4,300. Now the Grand Prix track was $75, $77.50, and $8,000. So that was right in the price, a little bit actually cheaper than the Emperor or the Sovereign. And we're talking Grand Prix was available. I can't really see the standard or how many feet. It doesn't say how many feet. It just has the footprint. So that's the story on Revell Raceways. And, of course, here's what they call the rock and roll feature, which we'd call humps. And then they have the dip and roll section. Again, that's humps. And then they have like the arched bridge, which, launch ramps with any kind of fast cars, but cars didn't go real fast back then. And then, here they are showing their traverse section. Again, we call them crossovers. And then they talk about full visibility of the bank or whatever, and claim to be the most raceable in the industry. And then they are double-deck construction tracks. They are constructed totally different than American tracks. And I'm pretty sure that Revell tracks were not made in the same contract shop that American tracks were made. They were made somewhere else. So, and then this is a story from 1968, February of 68. So this would have been late 67. And if you notice this track, okay, it all tightens up from. So it says. Where's it at? Taking the standard American track, So I guess they're talking American Raceways. Taking the standard American track and filling about 8% of the stock grooves was the first step. And, the best I can tell, this would have to be like a Regal tracker, because just the way the S section is, like this is where you would come around and go onto the main straightaway. It's not an orange, which we know Revell had an orange, and you can faintly see here where the other lanes were at one time.
Right.
And they filled them in, and they rerouted this section of the track. So, here it is, 68, and they're coming up with different ideas, but the end is near. And I really don't know when Revell quit making tracks. No idea. But and then this was a company called Model Raceways Limited. I don't have very much information on them. I really don't know. Well, yeah, I do know where these guys were at. This is Model Raceways Limited. This is, and we'll get to the other part of that. But they offered several different layouts. Suzuka's, Le Mans, Sebring, Daytona. And, going back to that international track thing, maybe those were Model Raceway tracks that had international names. That was at Celebrity Sports Center. But there's Targa. But I don't think they had one called Tubby. We'll see here. Norwood, Sebring, Le Mans, Darlington, Monaco, Indy. And Model Raceways, Inc., I think was out of Connecticut or Massachusetts. But we'll get to that in a minute. This was a weird company here, Precision Speed Equipment. They were out of Compton, California. They offered 6-lane modular type tracks. You would basically order a track based on sections and then bolt it together. They really didn't have any certain layout. It was custom make your own. Milla Magilla was the glass tracks, which the tracks were made out of fiberglass. And I've never seen one. Don't know how big they ever got, but that was kind of a name for a short time back in the 60s. This is another strange company. This was called MR Raceways, Modern Raceways, Inc. They were in Bellefontaine, Ohio, which that is about 30 to 40 miles northwest of Columbus, Ohio, and they sold tracks by sections, components, make your own, let your creation, imagination, set up a track like this and then add on like this or add on like this. And they had a raceway in Columbus, Ohio called Barron Raceway. No idea where it was in Columbus. I was told years ago that back in the heyday there was 45 slot car tracks or raceways in the Columbus, Ohio area at the same time. So
let that sink in. 45 tracks in one city.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Okay, so R&J is Custom Line Model Raceways, Bloomfield Avenue in Fairfield, New Jersey. They announced their new super tracks. They had 26 models from 100 foot to 230 foot. And the new super tracks, they had 5 new super tracks, 172 to 236 foot lap length. So, but they claim they had 26 different tracks. I don't know, again, 26 different styles or 13 styles and, 2 different links.
Now it says distributed by, and I can't read the logo, but again, it looks like we have a steering wheel and a cross-checker fly logo.
Well, that's Minra.
Okay.
They were the official track of Minra.
Okay.
Okay, so back to Mr. Raceways. Mr. Raceways was a division of R&J. Okay, and they were out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And this is the Indy 300, 300-foot lap length. One of our viewers, Mike Branian from California, I think he ran on this track.
That's the fastest track in the world right there.
How can it be the fastest if it's the longest?
I don't know.
Okay,
But
so anyway.
Don't let Tracy know.
Peter Lintros knows a little bit about this track, and I think Tony P might even know a little bit about this track too. But so that was Mr. Raceways, and Mr. Raceways was a division of Model Raceways Limited, which here it says Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I don't know if We know that R&J, which was also R&J was Model Raceways Limited, was in New Jersey. So I don't know where the tie-in was with the two, but, you know, they claim to be a division of Model Raceways Limited. So, and then maybe Model Raceway Limited moved from New Jersey, R&J, which was Model Raceways Limited, moved to Massachusetts, and then there was who knows, but more unanswered questions. So, again, these were just 3 different ads showing the Indy 300. And then here's another R&J ad, and they were the builders of MINRA sanctioned tracks. And, well, you know, R&J might have been separate because it does say custom line model roadways. So maybe they were separate from Model Raceways. So maybe it was Mr. Raceways and Model Raceways in Cambridge, and then it looks like it was Custom Line in Fairfield, New Jersey. So there, I think we just solved that problem. And again, Tony P. and Noose and those guys, and Mike Katz, and I don't know, some of those guys, that old timers that raced back in the New Jersey area back in the day, they probably ran on these types of tracks or these brands of tracks. But I mean, out in the Midwest, or I've never seen any. Race A Go-Go was another race company. Dave Gehring says they were out of Elgin, Illinois, but it says manufacturing company Chicago. But Elgin was close enough to Chicago to use Chicago. But this is I don't have any pictures of any Race A Go-Go tracks. I don't think there was very many made. Dave Gehring owned one years ago when he was stationed in Rantoul, Illinois, on the military base. He had a raceway off base, and he had a Race A Go-Go track, which was kind of like that. Big Bend track, or not the Big Bend track. The other track I showed, it kind of had an S-curve coming out of where the Dead Man would be. He said the Race A Go-Go was similar to that. And then this is an actual hookup panel that he had from his track. So, you know, it had the power light and a jack, stereo jack, a polarity switch, and then I guess you could put your alligator clips down in those, or have some kind of plugs that go down in there. And then there was a company called Speed Pro. They were out of Florida as well, Miami to be exact. And their tracks were made out of rugged fiberglass, precision built. Again, I don't know much about Speed Pro. These are just two different ads, excuse me, and I've never seen one. And then there was Custom Raceways out of California, Sacramento, and this is kind of like a big Engelmann, if you would. And then it looks like it has a crossover back here, but I don't know where the other crossover is. So, or maybe there's a looks like there's straightaways back to back. So there was a crossover on one straightaway.
The crossovers like side by side back there.
Yeah. But again, I never heard of Custom Raceways either. So, and now this is interesting because this is a company called H&H. They would set you up in business for $69.95. Any make, any model, no ups and downs. Oh, wait a minute, that's Earl Scheib. They also claim that they were the oldest exclusive manufacturer of model racetracks. Now, I have no idea what year they started, H&H, but they claim to be the oldest, and I don't know if there's a date. No, I don't have a date here on these. I don't know what year they started, but they claim to be the oldest. And here's your Le Mans formula, Ralph. You got $69.95. Look what you will get. Here's what you get for $69.95. 8-lane standard road track. Others available, but at more money, of course. 4 6-foot showcases, 1 8-foot back counter, 2 pegboard, 2 pit stop and test track, 1 cash register, 1 cash register stand, 1 grass infield, 12 pitchers, 1 plexiglass outside sign, 3x10, 1 public address system, 2 flags, 1 30-foot black and white runner, and 1 lap counter. The biggest year in slot racing is just getting underway. So this must probably was 65 or so, 66 maybe. But 69.95, you were up and running. And again, I never heard of a H&H track or the Le Mans Formula. So with that, are you awake or are you sleeping over there?
I'm here. Yeah, this is like the famous picture here that.
Yep, the famous picture
goes around from time to time on Facebook or.
Yeah, this has been floating around since the 90s.
This was done by John. Did John Ford do this?
I think John Ford did this. And I've got the original here. I need to dig it out, and we'll have to follow up on that. But I'm pretty sure this was John Ford because, this was all the different track that American tracks offered. And, John Ford claimed that he bought the rights and the name American Model Raceways from AMF, or he acquired them. Maybe they gave them to him. I don't know. He claimed that he had talked to the people in England, and he got the okay to use American, and he just called his business American Tracks. And, you got like the San Antonio, which leads me to believe this is pretty much John's. But you've got a Super Engelmann, you got the Oval, Loop-de-Loop, Paperclip, Orange, the Zeke. The Zeke track is interesting. I don't think he originated that track because we raced on the Zeke, which was designed by the late Saba Zickel-Heidi, who was a pro racer for Team Cayman out of Chicago. In the early to late 80s, he was a Group 7 racer. He designed the Zeke track for Grand Raceway, which was owned by Jerry Coolidge at the time, and they had a Haase King there. And I'm sure Haase built that Zeke track. Hill climb, Euro hill climb, another San Antonio, Lazy 8, King Cobra, Purple, Blue King. What's he call this one? Well, this is a mini Cobra. That's the black, Kingelman. So, yeah, yellow. I'll have to get out, like I said, I'll have to dig it out, the original. And I think mine is like purple ink on white paper, or maybe it's blue ink on white.
Look at the loop-de-loop. See that?
Yeah, the loop-de-loop. Well, where's that at? I just seen it.
Bottom left.
Bottom left. Yeah. There was a loop-de-loop in the San Francisco area. And you know what? I have a picture of that. But, we're going to end here. And then at some point down the road, we're going to do a show on modern tracks. Because I'll have to dig them out. I've got a zillion pictures of different tracks I took over the years in all my travels. And I don't know. I went to the raceway that had the loop-de-loop at one time, and they were closed. Right? No, they weren't closed. I actually got to make a lap on that track because it's hard to believe that your car is going to stay on going through the loop-de-loop. And that track was actually, I believe, on the cover of one of the Scale Auto Racing News magazines back in the 90s.
What happens if the track power shuts off when you're in the middle of the loop-de-loop?
Track call, you will fall off.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Unless you have Magnatech braid and you got magnets in your car, that's the only
right.
Way. So, yeah, because, we could almost do a whole show just on hill climb tracks because there's been so many variations of hill climb tracks over the years, just as there has been Engelmann's and oval tracks is another one. I've seen so many different oval tracks, straight ovals, tri-ovals, quad ovals, flat ovals, banked and flat on one end. I mean, it just, there's so many variations. Like you said earlier about, there's a lot of tracks called Engelmann's. Well, they look like an Engelmann. They're not Engelmann's, but they're a C-shaped track. So, and I don't know what actually, what's this? This says mini Cobra or something, and then
That's what I thought. It said Cobra. Yeah.
okay.
But then you got the King Cobra and the Mini Cobra.
Well, and this one is
But the Mini Cobra just looks like an Alltech.
right. That looks well. Yeah, it looks like an Engelmann or the Titan.
Right. The
You know, basically, this Mini Cobra is the Engelmann type mirror track. Okay, like drivers, little S section down the straightaway, down in the dead man.
I know. Yeah, there's two different Santones.
Yeah, and I don't know what the
difference is the donut
and an eclair.
Yeah.
And then you've got Super Kingelman. See, we're missing some words. Kingelman, Super Kingelman, which that's just a longer version.
And another thing that's interesting, too, is he has a hill climb and a Euro hill climb. Now, I've never heard any hill climbs referred to as the Euro hill climb, but that's the way they always are that I've seen them.
Okay, let me find. Okay, Euro hill climb has a donut. Okay, I think. Okay, all hill climbs I ever ran on back in the day, early days, were like an American, where you went out to a 90 and a 180 and back up to the 45 top turn. Or they might not be.
Yeah, they've never been like the one in the picture that I've seen.
Right. Okay, so if they weren't a 90 coming out from underneath, they might be a 45 like this. And then you go out to a 180 and then around.
Right, sure,
Okay.
Right.
So as far as I know, and I'm going to swear to this, the first hill climb I ever seen with a donut was at Mini Indy Speedway in about 1987, and Chris Dad's built. It was the first track, first 8-lane commercial track that Chris Dad's built that I know of. I think he'd maybe built some smaller home set type tracks before that or club tracks, but that was his first full-sized 8-lane track, and it was made to fit in a building. It was a hill climb, and it had a donut, and it was the first hill climb I'd ever seen with a donut. But I don't recall it being called a Euro hill climb. So
right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I've never heard it referred to as that.
Right, and it just over time, when new hill climbs were getting built, they were all being built with donuts instead of 90s and 180s and a 45. Right. So, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know whoever named them Euro hill climbs, but maybe John Ford was. But, John Ford made another track, and I might have a picture of it, again, for another show, called the Prince. And it was a cool little track. And it was kind of an offshoot of a Royal or a Regal. And I just can't remember in my head right now how that was laid out. But they used to have one down at Bullitt Raceway in Louisville, which, again, I guess if it was a Bullitt, then Chris Dad's probably built it because he built all the original tracks that were in there. So, but they called it the Prince. So maybe, but I'm sure John Ford made a Prince too. But
right.
I don't know. So anyway, that's another show, another day. And
another guest, maybe.
Well, I've got some feelers out there. Yeah, Chris Dad's would be an interesting guy to have on too.
Sure, absolutely.
And I got a couple of special guests. Hopefully we'll have one next week because a couple of them that were supposed to be on a week or so ago, they were ill, and one I've made contact with, and now he's ill, and the other one I haven't heard from for 2 weeks, so he's MIA. But yeah, next week might be another history lesson. Let's see how my week goes the rest of the week. But there's a special birthday this month, and actually the birthday's next week, of something that's been around in our hobby for a long time. So we may talk about that next week. And we can do that without a special guest, but I'd like to get a special guest for that. But
sure,
we'll see what happens. So that's all I got for this week. And I hope you found this episode to be as interesting as episode 20. And gives you some more insight to all the different tracks and track builders they had back in the 60s. And I wish I had more pictures for you, but That's all I could come up with, and I think we probably went over an hour and a half already anyway. So
that leads me to the next question: is what is going to be the word of the show?
The word of the show this week. Well, we did American last week, so I would say let's go with Engelmann because he was probably the second most famous builder of the 60s.
Okay.
Okay, so Engelmann.
There it is, Engelmann.
It's his secret word. And it's real cold out there everywhere. Everywhere it's cold, so everybody stay warm and
be safe.
There's snow in places that normally don't get snow, so yeah, be safe. And we'll see you next week, and we'll get caught up on some race results and some upcoming races and get a little bit more back on track.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you guys have any other information that maybe we missed or anything, feel free to drop us a line. We'd love to, see some pictures or hear where you raced at or,
Yep.
tracks you raced on, all that kind of stuff. So
yep.
let us know.
Keep it coming.
All right. Thank you guys. See you next week.